I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. Russell Kane wiped the grease from his hands as the noon sun beat down on the driveway. The rag he used was already black with oil and sweat, but it did the job. His weathered fingers, calloused and scarred from years of mechanical work, and before that, war, told more about his life than he ever would with words. The bus would arrive any minute now. After 3 years of fighting the system, the courts had finally seen through Vivica's lies. Sole custody. The words still felt strange in his mouth when he muttered them to himself in the garage at night, bent over engines that made more sense than people ever did as a yellow school bus rumbled around the corner, and Russell straightened his back, ignoring the familiar twinge of pain from an old Gulf War injury. He wasn't one for sentiments, but today mattered. The bus wheezed to a stop. The door folded open with a mechanical sigh, and there he was. Lennox, 15 now, and so much taller than the last time Russell had been allowed to see him. The boy stepped down, clutching a duffel bag in one hand and a backpack in the other. Despite the Missouri summer heat pressing down like a weight, Lennox wore a long-sleeved gray hoodie, zipped up to his neck. "Hey, Dad." Lennox's voice had changed too, deeper now but quiet. His eyes darted around, taking in a modest ranch-style house, the garage with the bay door open, tools scattered on workbenches. "Welcome home, son." Russell moved forward, arm half raised for a hug, then stopped when Lennox took a small step back. Something cold settled in Russell's gut. He lowered his arm and gestured toward the house instead. "Got your room ready. Nothing fancy, but it's yours." Lennox nodded, eyes still not meeting his father's. "Thanks." They walked to the house in silence. Russell, noticing the way his son's shoulders hunched forward, how he startled when a car backfired on the next street over. Russell had seen that look before, on guys in his unit after particularly bad firefights. The distant gaze that wasn't really looking at anything in the present. Inside, the house was clean but sparse. Russell had never been one for decorating, but he'd tried. New sheets on Lennox's bed, a desk with a lamp, shelves for whatever a 15-year-old boy might want to put on them. "Bathrooms across the hall," Russell said, standing in the doorway as Lennox placed his bags on the bed. "Kitchen stocked. Got some burgers we can grill tonight if you want." Lennox nodded, still facing away. "Sound good." Russell hesitated, then added, "I work until 6 most days at the shop down on Mapleton, but I can adjust if you need anything. I'll be fine on my own." Lennox's voice was flat, rehearsed somehow. "All right then." Russell lingered for a moment. 1,000 questions hung in the air, but he wasn't a man who pried. Not his way. "I'll let you get settled." Back in the garage, Russell picked up a wrench and turned back to the Chevy he'd been working on. But his mind wasn't on carburetors anymore. Something was wrong with his boy. Not the normal kind of wrong that comes with being a teenager, or even the expected awkwardness of living with a father you haven't seen much in years. This was something else. Something that made Russell's combat instincts stir from their slumber. But he couldn't force it. Couldn't demand answers. Trust had to be earned back. He knew that much. So he would wait. And watch. And try to be whatever kind of father Lennox needed him to be. 3 weeks in a summer, and the pattern was clear. Lennox woke late, ate little, and spent most days in his room or on the porch with headphones on. When Russell suggested activities, fishing, a movie, even just a drive, Lennox would agree without enthusiasm and participate with minimal engagement. But it was the physical stuff that really got to Russell. The long sleeves despite temperatures climbing into the 90s. The way Lennox flinched if Russell moved too quickly. The locked bathroom door when Lennox showered. The refusal to go swimming at the town pool. Tonight, Russell was determined to try again. He'd found an old Honda motorcycle in the junkyard, a restoration project they could work on together. "Got something to show you," Russell said as he placed a plate of spaghetti in front of Lennox at dinner. His cooking repertoire was limited, but he was trying. Lennox looked up, fork hovering over his food. "What is it?" "After dinner. Out in the garage." 20 minutes later, Russell pulled the tarp off the motorcycle, revealing its rusted frame and missing parts. "Thought we could fix it up together. Get it running again." For the first time, a spark of genuine interest flickered in Lennox's eyes. "You think we can?" "I know we can. Engine's solid. Needs work, but nothing we can't handle." Russell grabbed an extra shop light. Want to take a closer look? Lennox stepped forward, then stopped, tugging at his sleeves. It's cool, but I don't know much about bikes. I'll teach you. Here. Russell offered a wrench. First lesson assessing what we're working with. Lennox reached for the tool, his sleeve riding up slightly. Russell caught a glimpse of something on his wrist. A band of discolored skin, like a healing rope burn. Lennox noticed his father's gaze and quickly pulled his sleeve down. I should get to bed. School stuff to do tomorrow. It's summer break, Russell said, his voice deliberately casual. Didn't know you had assignments. Just reading. For next year. Lennox backed away from the bike. Can we maybe start this weekend instead? Russell nodded, setting the wrench down. Whenever you're ready. No rush. That night, Russell sat on his back porch, nursing a beer and staring into the darkness. The neighbor's porch light cast long shadows across his yard. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. The normal sounds of a quiet suburban summer night. But inside Russell's head, a war drum was beginning to beat. Something was wrong with his son. Something someone had done to his son. The next afternoon, Russell came home early from the shop. He rarely took time off, but he told his boss he had family business. Not a lie, he found Lennox in the backyard, sitting under the only tree, still wearing long sleeves despite sweat beading on his forehead. Hot as hell out here, Russell commented, sitting on the grass a few feet away. Got some lemonade inside if you want. I'm okay. Lennox didn't look up from his book. You know, Russell said carefully, Missouri summers are brutal. When I was your age, I practically lived in shorts and t-shirts. Lennox's fingers tightened on his book. I just get cold easily, Dad. A bead of sweat rolled down Lennox's temple, betraying the lie. Russell watched it disappear into the collar of his son's hoodie. Right, he said. Cold. That night, they made burgers on the grill. After some coaxing, Lennox agreed to watch an action movie. It was the longest they'd spent together since his arrival. Russell noticed how his son sat at the far end of the couch, how he kept the hood of his sweatshirt up, how his eyes sometimes glazed over during the loudest parts of the movie. When a character was thrown through a window, the sudden crash of breaking glass made Lennox physically jump, his breathing quickening. You okay? Russell asked. Fine, Lennox said too quickly. Just wasn't expecting that. Later, Russell heard Lennox talking in his sleep, pleading with someone. He stood outside the door, listening to his son's nightmare unfold, his fists clenched so tight his nails cut into his palms. In the morning, Russell made pancakes. Another peace offering. Thought we could work on that bike today, he suggested. Lennox poked at his breakfast. Maybe. Got some parts ordered. Should be here next week. Russell watched his son's face. Might need to take your hoodie off, though. Engine grease is a pain to wash out. Lennox's fork stopped moving. I have t-shirts. Good. Russell took a sip of coffee. It's supposed to hit 95 today. Lennox said nothing, but Russell could see the wheels turning behind his eyes. Later, in the garage, Lennox did appear in a t-shirt, but with a button-up shirt over it, sleeves rolled down. He worked awkwardly, trying to keep the fabric from getting caught in the motorcycle parts. Here, Russell said, offering him some work gloves. These'll keep your hands clean at least. Their fingers brushed during the handoff, and Lennox flinched as if burned. Russell pretended not to notice, but the war drums in his head beat louder. That night, Lennox forgot to lock his bedroom door. Russell, making a late-night check as had become his habit, pushed it open a few inches to make sure his son was sleeping peacefully. Lennox was at his dresser, back to the door, shirt off. In the dim light from the window, Russell could see them. Welts across his son's back. Scars in various stages of healing. Some old white lines. Others newer, still pink and raised that Russell's sharp intake of breath gave him away. Lennox spun around, eyes wide with fear, grabbing for his shirt. Dad, he began, voice strangled. Russell stepped into the room, his face a stone mask hiding the rage building inside him. Who did this to you? Lennox clutched his shirt to his chest, but didn't put on. Maybe he was tired of hiding. No one. It's nothing. Don't lie to me, son. Russell's voice was quiet but firm. Not about this. Tears welled in Lennox's eyes. Please don't tell her I told you, he whispered. She'll find me. She always does. Russell's heart turned to ice in his chest. He'd suspected deep down. but hearing it, seeing the raw fear in his son's eyes that made it real. "Your mother?" he asked, already knowing the answer. Lennox nodded, a small, broken movement. "And Clyde?" "Her boyfriend." He pulled his shirt on with shaking hands. "They'll be mad if they know I said anything." Russell stepped forward slowly, telegraphing his movements. He placed a gentle hand on his son's shoulder. "No one is going to hurt you again," he said. "I promise you that." Lennox looked up, doubt clear in his eyes. He'd heard promises before. They'd never been kept. Russell left his son's room an hour later, after listening to halting descriptions of discipline that made his combat nightmares seem tame. He went to his study, closed the door, and began to write. Every detail, every scar Lennox had described, every punishment for imagined offenses he wrote until his hand cramped, until the sun began to rise. This wasn't just rage anymore. This was purpose. This was a mission. A week passed. Russell took Lennox shopping for new clothes. T-shirts, shorts, normal summer wear for a teenage boy. The cashier smiled at them, commenting on how alike they looked. "He's got your eyes," she said to Russell. Same serious expression, too. Russell couldn't muster a smile in return. He'd seen Lennox's back in full daylight now, had helped him apply medicated cream to the worst of the scarring, had heard more details of the hell his son had lived in for years. Each night, Russell added to his notebook. Names, dates, injuries, a record of atrocities committed against his flesh and blood. On Friday, Russell called in a favor from an old war buddy who worked at the courthouse. Official records, restraining orders filed and mysteriously dropped. Police calls to Vivica's address, never resulting in charges. When Lennox was occupied with a video game, Russell searched divorce records online. Found a transcript of the custody hearing. Read Vivica's testimony about his violent outbursts and inability to control his PTSD symptoms. Lies that had cost him his son. That night, Russell stood in his bathroom, staring at his reflection. He barely recognized the man looking back at him. The rage had hollowed him out, carved new lines into his face. But his eyes, those were different too. Focused. Like they'd been during the ward, a soft knock on the bathroom door broke his concentration. "Dad!" Lennox's voice was stronger these days, less hesitant. Russell opened the door. "What's up, son?" Lennox stood in the hallway, wearing only pajama bottoms. For the first time, he wasn't hiding his scars. "Can I show you something?" Russell nodded, following his son to the bedroom. Lennox opened his sock drawer and pulled out something wrapped in an old T-shirt. He carefully unwrapped it, revealing a small pocket knife. "Clyde gave me this," he said, holding it like it might bite him. Said a real man should always carry a knife. But I couldn't use it. Not the way he wanted. Russell's voice was deceptively calm when he asked, "What did he want you to use it for?" "Neighborhood cats," Lennox whispered. When I refused, the boy's hand drifted to a particular scar on his side, a perfect circle. He put his cigarette out here. Russell took the knife gently. "You did the right thing, Lennox. That's not what real men do." "What do real men do?" Lennox looked up at him, a hunger for guidance in his eyes. Russell considered his answer carefully. "They protect what's theirs. They stand up against people who hurt others." He set the knife on the dresser. "And they make sure justice gets served one way or another." Lennox nodded slowly. "Is that what you're going to do? Get justice?" The directness of the question caught Russell off guard. He'd been careful not to say anything explicit about his growing plans. But Lennox wasn't stupid. He'd seen the notebook, the late-night research. "I'm going to make sure you're safe," Russell finally said, "no matter what that takes." That night, Russell couldn't sleep. He sat on the back porch until dawn, his mind working through possibilities, contingencies, outcomes. By the time the sun rose, painting the sky in shades of fire, he had reached a decision. This wouldn't be handled in courtrooms or police stations. The system had failed his son once already. Russell wouldn't give it a chance to fail again. He went inside and made coffee, his movements precise and economical. Lennox found him there an hour later, already dressed and making breakfast. "You're up early," Lennox commented, grabbing orange juice from the fridge. "Got a lot to do today," Russell replied. "Thought we might drive out to that old property my dad left me. The hunting cabin." "Really?" Lennox looked surprised. Russell had never mentioned the cabin before. Been thinking it might be good to fix it up. Somewhere to go fishing, hunting, get away from town sometimes. Russell slid an omelet onto a plate. Might take some work, though. Lennox took the plate. I could help. Counting on it. Russell poured himself more coffee. We'll leave after breakfast. The drive out to the cabin took nearly an hour, down increasingly remote country roads. Lennox watched the scenery change from suburban houses to farmland to dense woodland. No one comes out here much, Russell explained as they bumped down the dirt access road. Neighbors are about 2 miles that way. He gestured vaguely east. Other than that, it's just woods for miles. The cabin itself was small and dilapidated. One main room with a kitchenette, a bedroom, and a crude bathroom. But most importantly, it had a cellar accessible through a trapdoor in the bedroom floor. Granddad used it for storing preserves and emergency supplies. Russell explained as they descended the rickety stairs. Could be fixed up, though. The cellar was dirt-floored, windowless, and smelled of damp earth. A single bulb hung from the ceiling, casting harsh shadows. What would we use it for? Lennox asked, looking around dubiously that Russell's face gave nothing away. Storage. Maybe a workshop. Depends. They spent the day clearing brush from around the cabin, patching the worst holes in the roof, and making a list of materials needed. Russell paid particular attention to the cellar, measuring the space, checking the electrical wiring. Is your mom's number? Russell asked casually as they drove home, pointing to a contact in Lennox's phone that lay on the console between them. Lennox stiffened. Yeah, what? Just wondering. Russell's voice betrayed nothing. She tried to call you recently? Once or twice? Lennox stared out the window. I didn't answer. Probably smart, Russell said. For now. At home. While Lennox showered, Russell copied the number into his own phone. Then he opened his notebook and wrote at the bottom of the last page, cabin ready in 2 weeks. Russell dreamed of Vivica that night. Not pleasant dreams. He saw her as she'd been when they first met 23, laughing at a bar, her dark hair catching the light. Beautiful enough to make him forget he'd sworn off relationships after what he'd seen in the Gulf. He saw her 6 months later, standing in their kitchen, red-faced with rage because he'd come home late from work, hurling a plate that shattered against the wall inches from his head. He saw her pregnant with Lennox. Both tender and cruel in bewildering alternation, he saw her in bed with another man, the first one he caught her with, but not the last. The look in her eyes when he confronted her, not shame, but something like satisfaction that he'd discovered her betrayal. And he saw her in the courtroom, perfectly composed in a conservative blue dress, tearfully describing his violent episodes, his drinking problem that he refused to address, his inability to provide stability. All lies, but delivered with such conviction that even his own lawyer had looked at him with doubt. Russell woke in a cold sweat, the bedsheets twisted around his legs. The digital clock read 3:17 a.m. He untangled himself and went to the kitchen for water, his mind still half in the past. Vivica had been awarded primary custody. Russell got every other weekend, which became every third weekend, which became monthly visits that Vivica frequently canceled at the last minute. Until 3 years ago, when she moved Lennox 2 counties away and got a restraining order based on an incident that never happened. It had taken 3 years of legal battles, character witnesses, and a hefty chunk of his savings to finally get the courts to listen. And even then, it was only because Lennox, at 15, was old enough for the judge to take his preference into account. But no one had asked about the bruises. No one had looked beneath Lennox's clothes. The system that was supposed to protect children had handed his son to monsters. Russell heard a sound and turned to see Lennox in the kitchen doorway, also awake at this ungodly hour. Couldn't sleep? Russell asked. Lennox shook his head. Bad dreams. Me too. Russell poured a second glass of water and handed it to his son. Want to talk about it? Lennox took a long drink before answering. It was about Clyde. About the time he caught me trying to call you. Russell's hand tightened on his glass. When was this? Last year. Lennox's voice was flat, emotionless, a defense mechanism Russell recognized all too well. Mom was out shopping. I found your number in her old address book. Thought maybe, he trailed off, but Russell could fill in the blanks. Thought maybe his father could help, could save him. What happened? Russell asked, though part of him didn't want to know. Clyde caught me, took the phone, laughed about it. Lennox's eyes had that faraway look again. Said you wouldn't help even if I reached you. Said you'd given me up because I was weak. Lennox pulled up his shirt, showing a series of small, round scars along his ribs. One for each number I dialed. Said he was teaching me about consequences. Russell set his glass down carefully, afraid he might crush it. And your mother? She watched, Lennox said simply. Sometimes she'd laugh along with him. Sometimes she'd tell him that was enough. But she never stopped him. Not really. Russell stared out the kitchen window at the darkness, seeing nothing. In his mind, he was calculating, planning. Dad, Lennox's voice pulled him back to the present. What are we going to do if they try to take me back? Russell looked at his son, really looked at him. Despite everything, there was still a core of strength there, a resilience that amazed him. They won't, Russell said with absolute certainty. I've got full custody now. They can't just take you. What he didn't say was what he was really thinking. They won't take you because they'll never get the chance. But what if they try? Lennox pressed. Russell put a hand on his son's shoulder, careful and gentle. Then I'll stop them, whatever it takes. The next morning, Russell made some calls. Old contacts, mostly. Guys he'd served with who now worked in law enforcement, security, even a few who operated in grayer areas. He was careful with his questions, keeping them hypothetical. Just gathering information. By afternoon, he had what he needed. He knew where to find Clyde Harrow, a bar called the Scrapyard on the east side of town, which he apparently owned. He knew Vivica was still living in the same house, now with Clyde. And he knew Clyde had a record 3 domestic assault charges that had been dropped when witnesses suddenly became uncooperative. Going to pick up some supplies, Russell told Lennox. Back in a couple hours. Pizza good for dinner? Sure, Lennox answered, not looking up from his video game. These days, he seemed almost like a normal teenager at times. Almost. The Scrapyard was exactly what Russell expected. A dive bar with neon beer signs and motorcycles parked out front. Not yet open for the day. Perfect. He parked across the street and watched as a middle-aged man unlocked the front door. Too old to be Clyde, based on what Russell knew. Probably an employee. Russell waited until the man had gone inside, then crossed the street. The door was unlocked. He walked in like he belonged there. We're not open yet. The man called from behind the bar where he was counting bottles. Come back at 4. Just looking for Clyde, Russell said, approaching the bar. Got a business proposition for him. The man looked up, instantly wary. Who's asking? Name's Russell Kane. He doesn't know me, but I think he'll want to hear what I have to say. Russell leaned on the bar, the picture of casual interest. You work here long? 15 years, the man said, still suspicious. Jasper Miller. I'm the manager. 15 years. So you know Clyde pretty well then. Jasper's eyes narrowed. What's this really about? Russell decided to take a calculated risk. My son, Lennox. His mother is Vivica Neely. Ring any bells? Jasper's expression changed, a shadow crossing his face. You're that, Russell. That's right. Russell watched the man carefully. Seems like you've heard of me. Jasper glanced toward the door, then back at Russell. Look, man, I'm just an employee. Whatever's between you and Clyde. I'm just gathering information right now. Russell interrupted smoothly. No trouble. Just want to understand what kind of man is dating my ex-wife and spending time around my son. Jasper hesitated, conflict visible on his face. Finally, he spoke in a lower voice. Clyde's hands don't just mix drinks. He hurt more than your boy, but no one's brave enough to speak. That's all I'm saying. Russell nodded slowly. Appreciate the honesty. I didn't say nothing, Jasper insisted. And you weren't here asking. Got it, Russell agreed. One more thing, Clyde have any regular habits? Places he goes, things he does? Jasper wiped the bar with a rag, not meeting Russell's eyes. Comes in around 6 most days. Stays till closing. Takes Wednesday nights off. Usually goes fishing at Lake Carson. Thanks, Russell said, sliding a 20 across the bar. For nothing. Outside, Russell sat in his truck, making notes. Lake Carson was about 30 minutes from his cabin. An isolated area. Interesting, his phone rang. Unknown number. Russell answered, his stomach tightening when he heard the voice. Well, Russell Kane. Vivica's voice, smooth as honey but with that familiar edge. Been a while. Russell controlled his breathing. How'd you get this number, Vivica? Oh, I have my ways. She laughed lightly. Heard you've been asking about Clyde. Not very subtle, are you? Word traveled fast in small towns. Russell should have expected that. Just getting to know the neighbors, he said neutrally. The disbelief in her voice was clear. Look, I thought we should talk. About Lennox. Nothing to talk about. I have full custody now. For now, Vivica agreed, a threat lurking beneath the words. But things change. Judges reconsider, especially when new evidence comes to light. Russell's grip tightened on the phone. What are you talking about? Why don't we discuss it in person? Vivica suggested. I'll come by your place tomorrow. Around noon. It was the last thing Russell wanted, but also an opportunity. Fine, he said shortly. Tomorrow at noon. After hanging up, Russell sat for a long moment, staring at nothing. Then he started the truck and drove to the hardware store. He filled his cart methodically. Heavy-duty gloves, plastic sheeting, duct tape, rope, a new shovel. None of it suspicious on its own, just a homeowner doing maintenance. But together, they formed the outline of something darker. The cashier chatted cheerfully as she rang him up. Doing some renovations? Just fixing up an old hunting cabin. Russell replied with a practiced smile. Long overdue. The next morning, Russell was fixing the front porch steps when a pickup truck pulled into the driveway next door. A woman in her late 30s climbed out, groceries in her arms. Russell had seen her before. Callie Breyer, the neighbor. Single mother, 2 kids away at their grandparents for the summer. Works as a nurse at the county hospital. They'd exchanged nods, but not much else. Need a hand with those? Russell called, setting down his hammer. Callie looked surprised at the offer. Sure, thanks. Russell took 2 of the heavier bags, following her to her front door. I'm Russell, by the way. Don't think we've properly met. Callie, she replied, fishing keys from her pocket. Heard you got your son back. That's good. Russell raised an eyebrow. News travels fast. Small town. Callie shrugged, pushing her door open. Just set those on the counter. Russell did as asked, noticing the organized kitchen, the children's artwork on the fridge. A normal home. Thanks again, Callie said, clearly expecting him to leave. Russell hesitated. Actually, I was wondering if you had a minute to talk. Professional question. Callie's brow furrowed. Professional? You're a nurse, right? At county. She nodded slowly. Emergency department. What? Russell chose his words carefully. My son. He's got some injuries. Healing, but I'm worried about infection. Don't want to drag him to a hospital if it's not necessary. Something in Callie's expression shifted. Understanding, maybe. What kind of injuries? Better if I show you. Russell met her eyes. If you don't mind coming over to take a look. 10 minutes later, Callie stood in Lennox's bedroom, her face professionally neutral as she examined the welts and scars on the boy's back. Lennox sat stiffly on the edge of his bed, staring at the floor. Some of these are quite old, Callie observed, her fingers gentle as she checked a particularly nasty scar. Others are more recent. This one here might need antibiotic cream. She glanced at Russell. How did these happen, Lennox? Lennox looked to his father, who nodded slightly. My mom's boyfriend, he said quietly. And sometimes my mom, too. Callie's professional mask slipped, just for a second, revealing anger beneath. I see. She opened the medical bag she'd brought with her. I'm going to clean a few of these and apply some ointment. Is that okay? Lennox nodded. While she worked, Russell watched from the doorway. Callie was efficient but gentle, explaining each step to Lennox. When she was done, she helped him put his shirt back on and gave him some privacy, joining Russell in the hallway. Those aren't accidental injuries, she said, her voice low. Those are methodical, deliberate. I know, Russell replied, equally quiet. Have you reported this? To who? The same system that gave him to her in the first place. Russell's bitter tone said it all. Callie frowned. There are channels. She'll lawyer up and make it look like you're poisoning him against her. Or worse, like I did it. Russell's gaze was unwavering. The system failed him once. I won't let it happen again. Callie studied him, a nurse's evaluating gaze. What are you planning to do? Keep him safe. That's all. Russell. Callie hesitated. I should document these injuries. Officially. And I should have called the police the first night I saw them, Russell countered. But we both know what would happen. She'd deny everything. Clyde would back her up, and Lennox would be put through hell all over again, reliving every moment while lawyers and judges decide what's best for him. Callie was silent for a long moment. Then, I have a camera in my bag. I can at least take photos. Confidential ones. Just in case. Russell nodded slowly. That would be helpful. Thank you. After Callie had documented Lennox's injuries and left, Russell found his son in the kitchen, making a sandwich. She seems nice, Lennox commented. She is, Russell agreed. She's going to help us keep track of your healing. Lennox set down the knife he was using to spread mayonnaise. Dad, is Mom really coming over today? Russell had told him about Vivica's call. No point hiding it. That's what she said. But you don't have to see her if you don't want. I don't, Lennox said immediately. But, he trailed off, uncertain. But what? What if she tries to take me back? The fear in his voice was palpable. Russell placed a hand on his son's shoulder. She won't. I promise. But I think it might be good if you're not here when she comes. Why don't you go to a movie or something? I'll give you some cash. Okay, Lennox agreed, relief evident in his voice. Thanks, Dad. At exactly noon, a black Audi pulled into Russell's driveway. Lennox was already gone, safely away from the house. Russell watched from the window as Vivica stepped out of the car, as polished and calculated as ever in designer jeans and a silk blouse. He opened the door before she could knock. Vivica, her red-painted lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Russell, you're looking rugged as ever. What do you want? No point in pleasantries. Aren't you going to invite me in? She gestured to the open door. For old time's sake, Russell stepped aside, allowing her to enter. She walked through his house like she was inspecting a subpar hotel room, trailing a finger over surfaces, checking for dust. Where's my son? She asked, noticing the silence. Out, Russell replied simply. He didn't want to see you. Vivica's expression hardened. You turned him against me. You did that yourself. She laughed, a brittle sound. Still the same self-righteous Russell. Some things never change. She moved to the living room, sitting uninvited on his couch. Let's cut to the chase. I want joint custody. Russell remained standing. Not going to happen. Don't be so sure, Vivica countered, reaching into her purse. She pulled out a folded document. I've been talking to my lawyer. There are grounds for appeal. On what basis? Russell didn't bother looking at the paper. Lennox has behavioral issues, violent tendencies. He needs psychological evaluation, possibly medication. Vivica's face was a mask of maternal concern. He's not safe with just you. You don't have the skills to handle a troubled teen. Russell felt a wave of disgust. You're unbelievable. After what you and Clyde did to him. What we did. Vivica's eyes widened in mock surprise. Oh, Russell, has he been telling you stories? You know how Lennox exaggerates. Always has. I've seen the scars, Russell said coldly. Every single one. Something flickered in Vivica's eyes, a momentary uncertainty. But she recovered quickly. Teenage boys get into fights. Have accidents. Lennox was always clumsy. Get out of my house, Russell said, his voice dangerously quiet. Vivica stood, maintaining her composure. This isn't over, Russell. Lennox is my son, too. And I have resources you can't imagine. Is that a threat? It's a reality. She moved toward the door, then paused, looking back at him. Oh, and Clyde wants to meet you. Man to man. He thinks we should all be friends. Her smile was all teeth. For Lennox's sake. After she left, Russell called Callie. Can you come over? It's important. 20 minutes later, they sat at his kitchen table, reviewing the photos she'd taken of Lennox's injuries. Russell explained Vivica's visit, her threats, her denial. She's going to try to take him back, Russell concluded. Paint him as unstable, me as incompetent. Callie studied the photos on her digital camera. These would be hard to explain away as accidents. Only if someone in authority actually looks, Russell pointed out, and believes what they're seeing. I could testify, Callie offered. As a medical professional, Russell shook his head. I appreciate that, but it wouldn't be enough. Vivica has money, connections. And Lennox, he couldn't handle a drawn-out court battle. being forced to see them regularly during supervised visits or whatever they'd arrange. Callie was quiet for a moment. "What are you thinking of doing, Russell?" He met her gaze steadily. "Nothing you need to worry about." "That's not an answer. It's the only one I can give you right now." Callie frowned. "If you're planning something extreme, you should reconsider. For Lennox's sake." "Everything I do is for Lennox's sake," Russell replied. "He deserves justice." "Justice and revenge aren't the same thing," Callie warned. "Be careful, Russell. If you cross certain lines, there's no coming back." Russell nodded, but said nothing. In his mind, those lines had already been crossed not by him, but by the people who had tortured his son. What he was planning wasn't revenge. It was balancing the scales. As Callie gathered her things to leave, she paused at the door. "I've seen what abuse does to people," she said quietly. "Not just physically. It changes them inside. Lennox is still young enough to heal, to have a normal life. But he needs stability. Safety." She looked directly at Russell. "He needs his father, not a martyr or an avenger." After she left, Russell sat alone at the kitchen table, her words echoing in his head. She was right about one thing: Lennox needed him. But what Callie didn't understand was that sometimes keeping your child safe meant getting your hands dirty. The scrapyard was busy when Russell walked in 3 nights later. Country music blared from speakers, pool balls clacked, and conversations competed with the noise. Russell took a seat at the bar, ordered a beer, and waited. Jasper was working, moving efficiently between customers. He gave Russell a brief nod of recognition, but nothing more. Professional distance. It took 20 minutes before Russell spotted Clyde. A big man with slicked-back dark hair and the confident swagger of someone who owned the place literally and figuratively. He moved through the crowd, slapping backs, accepting handshakes, playing the role of genial host. Russell observed without staring. Clyde looked strong, but carried extra weight around his middle. Late 30s or early 40s. An ostentatious watch on his wrist and a carefully maintained 5 o'clock shadow. The kind of man who thought appearance equaled substance that a text message lit up Russell's phone. "Lennox, everything okay?" Russell typed back, "Fine. At the store. Need anything?" The lie came easily when it was protective. Lennox didn't need to know about this reconnaissance mission. Jasper drifted back to Russell's into the bar. "He's seen you," he muttered while pretending to wipe the counter. "Been asking who you are." Russell took a casual sip of his beer. "What did you tell him?" "Nothing specific. Just a new guy in town." Jasper's eyes flicked toward the back of the bar. "He's watching you now." Russell didn't turn around. "Good." As if on cue, Russell felt a presence behind him. A heavy hand clapped his shoulder. "Haven't seen you in here before," a voice said, friendly but with an underlying edge. "Clyde Harrow. I own the place." Russell turned slowly, coming face to face with the man who had tortured his son. In his mind, he saw Lennox's scars, heard his nightmares. But his face revealed nothing. "Russell Kane," he replied, extending a hand. "Just checking out the local spots." Clyde shook his hand, gripping slightly too hard. A dominance move. "Kane," he repeated, recognition dawning in his eyes. "Any relation to Lennox Kane?" "My son," Russell confirmed, watching Clyde carefully. "Well, I'll be damned." Clyde's smile didn't reach his eyes. Vivica's ex, small world. "Very small," Russell agreed, taking another sip of his beer. Clyde leaned against the bar. "Heard Lennox is staying with you now. How's that going?" "He could be a handful." The casual way he said it, as if they were just two men discussing a slightly troublesome teenager, made Russell's blood boil. But he maintained his calm demeanor. "He's a good kid. Adjusting well. Good to hear." Clyde signaled Jasper for a drink. "Vivica mentioned you two had a nice chat the other day." "Did she?" Russell's tone gave nothing away. "She thinks we should all try to get along. For Lennox's sake." Clyde accepted the whiskey Jasper poured him. "I agree. No reason we can't be civilized." Russell studied him, trying to reconcile this smooth-talking businessman with the monster Lennox had described. It wasn't hard. He'd seen men like Clyde before, charming in public, demons in private. "Civilized," he repeated. Interesting choice of word. Something flashed in Clyde's eyes, a momentary break in the facade. "Just trying to make peace here, man. For the kid." "Right." Russell drained his beer and stood up. Well, I should get going. Nice meeting you, Clyde. Hold up, Clyde said, his voice hardening slightly. Vivica and I were thinking maybe we could all get together. Talk things through. Maybe at that cabin of yours. Russell froze. How did he know about the cabin? Lennox must have mentioned it to Vivica during one of her calls. Why the cabin? Clyde shrugged. Neutral ground. Away from town. Easier to have a frank discussion. The implied threat wasn't subtle. Russell nodded slowly. I'll think about it. Do that, Clyde said, raising his glass in a mock toast. We've got a lot to discuss about Lennox's future. Outside, Russell sat in his truck, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. The encounter had confirmed what he already knew. Vivica and Clyde were planning something. They wanted Lennox back, or at least wanted to undermine Russell's custody. And they weren't above intimidation to get what they wanted, but they'd made a mistake. They'd shown their hand too early, and they'd given Russell exactly what he needed, an opportunity. He started the truck and drove home, his mind working through details, contingencies, timing. The cabin would be ready soon. And then, as Clyde had suggested, they could have a frank discussion. Indeed, I could tee home. Lennox was asleep on the couch, a movie still playing on the TV. Russell covered him with a blanket, then went to his study. He took out his notebook and added Clyde's name to a growing list of notes. Then he opened his laptop and began researching one very specific topic: soundproofing materials. The next morning, Russell took Lennox to breakfast at a local diner. They were just finishing when Russell noticed Vivica walking in with Clyde. Not a coincidence. This town wasn't that small. We should go, Russell said quietly to Lennox, whose back was to the door. What? Lennox asked, then stiffened as he heard a familiar laugh. He turned, saw his mother, and visibly paled. Dad, it's okay, Russell assured him, placing some bills on the table. We're leaving. But it was too late. Vivica had spotted them and was making her way over, Clyde in tow. Lennox, she exclaimed, as if delighted. What a wonderful surprise. Lennox shrank back in his seat. Russell stood, positioning himself between his son and the newcomers. We were just leaving, he said firmly, without saying hello. That's not very polite. Vivica's smile was shark-like. She looked past Russell to Lennox. Sweetie, aren't you going to give your mother a hug? Lennox didn't move. Russell could feel him trembling slightly behind him. He doesn't want to talk right now, Russell said. Respect that. Clyde stepped forward, his public face firmly in place. Come on, man. She just wants to see her son. No harm in that. Several diners were watching now. A public scene, exactly what Vivica wanted. If Russell appeared aggressive or uncooperative, it would play in her narrative of him being unstable. 5 minutes, Russell said finally. At our table. Just you, Vivica. Not him. He nodded toward Clyde. Vivica's smile tightened, but she agreed. Of course. Just a mother-son chat. Russell led Lennox back to their table, whispering, You don't have to say anything you don't want to. I'll be right here. Vivica sat across from Lennox, while Russell stood a few feet away, watching. Clyde waited by the door, also observing. You look thin, Vivica said, reaching across to touch Lennox's hand. He pulled away. Her expression flickered. Are you eating properly? Getting enough sleep? Lennox nodded mutely. You haven't returned my calls, Vivica continued, her voice taking on a hurt tone. I've been worried sick. Lennox glanced at Russell, who gave him an encouraging nod. I've been busy, Lennox said, his voice barely audible. Too busy for your mother. Vivica leaned forward. Honey, I know things weren't always perfect at home, but Clyde and I miss you terribly. The house is so empty without you. Russell watched his son's face, saw the confusion there. The manipulation was working, creating doubt. Vivica had always been good at that, making her victims question their own memories, their own pain. Remember that nice private school we talked about? Vivica continued. Clyde pulled some strings. They've accepted you for fall semester. Wouldn't that be wonderful? A fresh start. Before Lennox could answer, Russell stepped forward. Time's up, he said firmly. Vivica's mask slipped, just for a second, revealing the anger beneath. But she recovered quickly, standing with a graceful movement. Think about it, sweetie, she said to Lennox. We could be a family again. A better one this time. As she walked away, Rejoining Clyde at the door, Lennox let out a shaky breath. She acts like nothing happened, he whispered. Like she didn't watch while he broke off, unable to finish. Russell placed a steadying hand on his son's shoulder. I know. Let's go home. In the parking lot, Russell noticed Clyde watching them from beside Vivica's Audi. Their eyes met, and Clyde smiled a cold, knowing expression that sent a chill down Russell's spine. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Over the next week, Russell made frequent trips to the cabin, turning it from a dilapidated hunting shack into something more functional. He installed a generator for reliable power, reinforced the cellar door, added new locks on all entrances. Lennox helped, seemingly glad for the distraction. They worked side by side, building shelves, patching walls, clearing the overgrown path to the nearby creek. The physical labor seemed to do the boy good, giving him purpose, a way to rebuild not just the cabin but himself. You think we could come out here sometimes? Lennox asked one afternoon as they took a break by the creek. Like to fish or whatever? Russell nodded, watching a leaf float downstream. That's the plan. Get away from town when we need to. Get away from them, you mean? Lennox wasn't asking. Russell didn't deny it. For now, at least. What happens when school starts? Lennox picked up a stone, turning it over in his hands. Mom mentioned that private school. She won't give up. No, she won't, Russell agreed. But neither will I. On their way home, they stopped for supplies at a hardware store in the next town over less chance of running into anyone who knew them. Russell's cart contained an odd assortment. Heavy-duty gloves, rope, motion sensors, plastic sheeting. What's all this for? Lennox asked, eyeing the items. Russell had prepared for this question. Security system for the cabin. Motion sensors to let us know if anyone comes around when we're not there. The rest is just maintenance stuff. Lennox seemed to accept the explanation, but gave his father a long look that suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. That evening, Callie came over with dinner, a homemade lasagna. Thought you guys might be tired of burgers and pizza, she explained. Russell accepted the dish gratefully. He wasn't much of a cook, and Lennox deserved better than takeout every night. Thanks. Join us. Callie hesitated, then nodded. Sure, why not? Over dinner, Lennox actually smiled a few times, even laughed at a story Callie told about a patient who'd come to the ER with a remote control stuck in an embarrassing place. It was the most normal evening they'd had in weeks. After Lennox went to bed, Russell and Callie sat on the back porch, sharing a bottle of wine. He seems better, Callie observed. More relaxed. Working on the cabin helps, Russell said. Gives him something to focus on besides the past. Callie nodded, taking a sip of wine. And what about you? What are you focusing on? Russell looked out at the darkness beyond the porch light. Keeping him safe. Russell, Callie's voice held a warning. If you're planning what I think you're planning. I'm not, he lied smoothly. Just making us a safe space. Somewhere to go if things get complicated. Callie studied his face, clearly not believing him. Vivica and her boyfriend, they're dangerous people. Vindictive. I know that better than anyone, which is why I'm worried. Callie set down her glass. If you do this, there's no coming back. Even if no one ever finds out, and that's a big if you'll have to live with it. Lennox will have to live with it. Somehow. Is that what you want for him? More secrets? More trauma? Russell was quiet for a long moment. What would you have me do? Trust the system? The same one that gave Lennox to them in the first place? The one that looked the other way for years while they torture my son? No, Callie admitted. The system failed him. But that doesn't mean... It means I'm all he has, Russell interrupted. The only thing standing between him and more pain. Callie reached out, touched his arm. You're not alone in this. There are other ways. We could document everything. Get depositions from other victims. I'm sure there are others. Build a case that even Vivica's money can't bury. And how long would that take? Russell asked. Months? Years? With Lennox looking over his shoulder the entire time, waiting for them to find a way to get to him. Callie had no answer for that. I appreciate what you're trying to do, Russell said more gently. But this is my responsibility. My son, my fight. Just promise me you won't do anything rash, Callie pleaded. For Lennox's sake, if not your own. Russell nodded, not quite a promise. I should get some sleep. Early start tomorrow. After Callie left, Russell went to his study and opened the bottom drawer of his desk. Inside was a small metal box locked. He unlocked it with a key from his pocket, revealing a handgun, a 9mm Glock he'd owned since before the war. Legal, registered. He hadn't touched it in years. Russell didn't take out the gun, just looked at it for a long moment before closing and locking the box again. Not yet. Maybe not at all. But it was there if needed. The next morning, Russell received a text from an unknown number. Heard you're fixing up that old cabin. Mind if I swing by to see it? Been thinking about our chat. Clyde Russell showed the message to Lennox over breakfast. How'd he get my number? Lennox paled. Mom must have given it to him. Dad, you're not going to meet him, are you? Russell considered his options. This was earlier than he'd planned, but perhaps better. Might be good to know what he wants, he said carefully. He wants to hurt you, Lennox said, his voice rising. Like he hurt me. That's what he does. I'm not you, Lennox, Russell replied calmly. I'm not a child he can intimidate. And I'm not alone. Lennox didn't look convinced. You can't trust him. Or Mom. They lie all the time. I know that. Russell put a hand on his son's shoulder. But sometimes you have to meet your enemy to understand them better. Learn their weaknesses. Or they learn yours, Lennox countered. Russell smiled slightly. I don't have many weaknesses for them to find. Except you. And they already know that. After some discussion, they agreed that Russell would meet Clyde at the cabin the following day. Lennox would stay with Callie, safe and far from whatever might transpire. Just to talk, Russell assured his son. Nothing more. But that night, after Lennox was asleep, Russell made final preparations. He loaded the generator with fuel, checked the locks on the cellar door, made sure the plastic sheeting was neatly folded and hidden under the sink, tested the motion sensors. Then he went home and wrote 2 letters, one to Lennox, one to Callie, just in case things didn't go according to plan. He sealed them in envelopes and placed them in his desk drawer beneath some ordinary paperwork. In the morning, he acted normal. Made breakfast. Joked with Lennox about a video game they'd played the night before. Drove him to Callie's with an overnight bag. Just one night, Russell promised. Maybe 2 at most. Lennox hugged him tightly before getting out of the truck. Be careful, Dad. Always am, Russell replied. As he drove toward the cabin, Russell felt a strange sense of calm. No anxiety, no fear. Just clarity. Whatever happened in the next 24 hours would decide his son's future. One way or another, the threat would be eliminated. He could see the cabin. He made one final sweep. Everything was ready. Then he texted Clyde. Cabin's yours to visit. Address below. Come alone. This afternoon works. The reply came quickly. See you at 4. Looking forward to our chat. Russell put his phone away and sat on the cabin's small porch, watching the shadows move across the clearing as the sun inched toward the west. In his pocket was a burner phone he'd purchased yesterday. On it, he'd programmed just one number, Jasper's. The plan was simple. Lure Clyde to the cabin with the promise of a discussion about Lennox. Subdue him, get him to the cellar. Then call Vivica from Clyde's phone, tell her Clyde needed help at the cabin. When she arrived, take her too. After that, Russell wasn't entirely sure. Part of him wanted to make them suffer, as Lennox had suffered. Another part just wanted them gone, permanently, with no trace left to find. What he didn't know was that by tomorrow, the threat to his son would be eliminated. One way or another. Clyde arrived at exactly 4 o'clock, his black pickup truck crunching on the gravel drive. Russell watched from the cabin window as the man stepped out, looked around, then approached the porch with a confident stride. Nice place, Clyde called out. Secluded. Russell opened the door, revealing that he held a hunting rifle casually in one hand. Not pointed at Clyde, but present. A warning. That's the point, he replied. Clyde's eyes flicked to the gun, then back to Russell's face. His smile tightened. Expecting trouble, always prepare for the worst, Russell said, stepping aside. Come in. Beer. The cabin's main room was simple: a couch, a table with chairs, a small kitchenette. The bedroom door was closed. The trapdoor to the cellar, hidden under a rug, wasn't visible. Clyde entered cautiously, his gaze sweeping the room. Cozy. Russell set the rifle against the wall, just out of Clyde's reach, and went to the kitchenette. He pulled 2 beers from a cooler, opened them. and handed one to Clyde. So, you wanted to talk. Clyde took a long swig of beer. About Lennox. About all of us figuring out how to move forward. Moving forward, Russell repeated, not drinking his beer. What does that look like to you? Clyde settled himself on the couch, feigning relaxation. Vivica misses her son. That's natural. She's his mother. Mothers don't watch while their sons are tortured, Russell said flatly. Clyde's expression hardened. That's a serious accusation. Not an accusation. A fact. Russell remained standing. Lennox told me everything, and I've seen the physical evidence. Kids exaggerate, Clyde said dismissively. Lennox has always been sensitive, prone to making things up for attention. Russell felt a surge of rage, but kept his voice even. Is that what you tell yourself? That the cigarette burns on his ribs are exaggerations? Something shifted in Clyde's eyes, a flash of the true man beneath the facade. Look, he said, leaning forward, whatever you think happened, it's not worth fighting over. We can work something out. Work something out, Russell echoed. Like what? Joint custody, Clyde suggested. Lennox spends weekends with us, maybe some holidays. We all agree to leave the past in the past. Russell smiled thinly. The past where you whipped my son for fun? That past. Clyde's own smile vanished. Be careful, Russell. Vivica and I have resources. Connections. We can make things very difficult for you. You already have, Russell replied. But that's over now. He moved suddenly, grabbing the rifle and leveling at Clyde. Don't move. Clyde froze, beer bottle halfway to his lips. What the hell are you doing? Protecting my son. Russell's voice was calm, almost conversational. Put the bottle down. Slowly, Clyde complied, eyes never leaving the rifle. You're making a big mistake. No, Russell said. You made the mistake. The day you laid hands on my son. What followed happened quickly. Russell ordered Clyde to his knees, bound his wrists with zip ties, and gagged him with duct tape. Then he dragged him to the bedroom, pulled back the rug, and opened the trapdoor to the cellar. Down, Russell commanded, gesturing with the rifle. Clyde's eyes widened with genuine fear now. He made muffled protests through the gag. Down, Russell repeated. Or, I shoot you here and dump you down anyway. With his hands bound, Clyde struggled to navigate the steep stairs. Russell followed close behind, rifle trained on his back. The cellar was dimly lit by a single bulb. In the corner sat a chair, bolted to the floor. Next to it, a small table with various items. Rope, more duct tape, a hammer. Russell secured Clyde to the chair, checking the bonds twice. Then he removed the gag. You're insane, Clyde spat. Vivica knows I'm here. If I don't come back, she'll come looking, Russell finished for him. I'm counting on it. Understanding dawned in Clyde's eyes. You can't do this. You'll go to prison. Lennox will end up in foster care. Only if they find you, Russell pointed out. And only if they can prove anything. Clyde strained against his bonds. What do you want? Money? I've got money. Whatever Vivica's paying in child support, I'll double it. Russell didn't answer. Instead, he took Clyde's phone from his pocket, found Vivica's number, and sent a text. At the cabin. Need you to come. Just you. Important about Lennox. The reply came quickly. What about Lennox? Is he there? Russell typed back, mimicking Clyde's brusque style. No. Something else. Come alone. Don't tell anyone. On my way. 30 men. Russell pocketed the phone. She's coming. You won't get away with this, Clyde said, but his bravado was slipping, replaced by growing fear. People know I came here. Do they? Russell raised an eyebrow. Who exactly? Clyde hesitated. Jasper. At the bar. I told him. Interesting, Russell said. Because I talked to Jasper this morning. He thinks you're fishing at Lake Carson today. Clyde's face fell. The lie had failed. What are you going to do to us? Russell didn't answer directly. You're going to sit here and think about every time you hurt my son. Every cut, every burn, every bruise. And then maybe you will talk. He turned and climbed the stairs, ignoring Clyde's shouts. Back in the main room, he closed the trapdoor, replaced the rug, and waited. Vivica arrived in exactly 30 minutes, her Audi pulling up next to Clyde's truck. Russell watched her from the window, elegantly dressed as always, impatient, checking her phone as she approached the cabin. He opened the door before she could knock. Vivica, She frowned, glancing past him. Where's Clyde? Inside. Come in. Suspicion darkened her features, but curiosity won out. She stepped inside, immediately sensing something was wrong. What's going on, Russell? Where's Clyde? Russell closed the door behind her. Sit down, Vivica. I don't think so. She started to back toward the door. This was a mistake. I'm leaving. Russell blocked her path. No, you're not. What followed was chaos. Vivica tried to run, to fight, to reason, to threaten. Russell, with the cold efficiency of a soldier, subdued her. Unlike with Clyde, he didn't bother with explanations or conversation. He simply bound her wrists, gagged her, and dragged her to the cellar. Clyde's eyes widened when he saw Vivica being forced down the stairs. Russell secured her to a second chair, positioned so she and Clyde faced each other. Then he removed both their gags. Vivica immediately began to scream. Russell let her. The cabin was miles from any neighbor. No one would hear. You're pathetic, she spat when she realized screaming was useless. This is why I left you. The boy needs real discipline. Russell's face remained impassive. You call what you did discipline? Someone had to teach him to be a man, Clyde interjected. He was soft, weak, like his father. Russell didn't take the bait. I'm going to leave you both down here for a while, to think about things. You can't just leave us here. Vivica's voice rose again. We need water, a bathroom. Lennox needed mercy. Russell cut her off. Did you give it to him? Before they could answer, he ascended the stairs, closed the trapdoor, and turned on the speaker system he'd installed. Through it, he played a recording Lennox's voice, describing in detail the abuse he'd suffered. The recording would loop all night. Russell sat on the cabin porch, listening to the distant sounds of Vivica and Clyde's muffled protests beneath the floorboards. The sun set. Darkness fell. Inside the cellar, his son's voice continued its litany of horrors. Justice was beginning. The night passed slowly. Russell didn't sleep. He sat on the porch, watching the stars wheel overhead, occasionally checking on his prisoners. They'd eventually stopped screaming and fallen into exhausted, uncomfortable sleep. At dawn, Russell made coffee and called Callie. How's Lennox? Fine, she answered, her voice revealing concern. Still sleeping. Russell, where are you? At the cabin, he said truthfully. Just needed some time to think. A pause. And Clyde? Did you meet with him? We talked, Russell said vaguely. Listen, can Lennox stay with you one more night? I've got some things to finish up here. Of course, Callie agreed. But Russell, whatever you're doing, be careful. Always am. After hanging up, Russell prepared. He put on gloves, laid plastic sheeting in one corner of the cellar, set up a spotlight, pointing directly at where his prisoners were secured. When everything was ready, he descended the stairs. Vivica and Clyde looked terrible, disheveled, exhausted, fearful. All pretense was gone now. Water, Vivica croaked. Please, Russell. Russell set 2 bottles of water on the small table. In a minute, he said. First, we're going to talk. About what? Clyde demanded, his voice hoarse from shouting. About justice. Russell pulled up a third chair, positioning it so the spotlight was at his back, casting his face in shadow while illuminating theirs. About consequences. Russell began methodically, almost clinically, listing every injury Lennox had described or that Russell had observed. 3 cigarette burns on the right side. Belt marks across the back and shoulders, 27 distinct scars. Rope burns on both wrists. A broken finger that healed crooked because you wouldn't take him to a doctor. As he spoke, Vivica's face contorted. Not with remorse, but with anger. You don't understand, she interrupted. Lennox was difficult, defiant. He needed what? Russell's voice remained steady. To be tortured? By his mother? By a man who got off on hurting a child? It wasn't like that, Clyde insisted, but weakly. Then what was it like? Russell leaned forward. Explain it to me. Help me understand why my son flinches when someone raises their hand near him. Why he has nightmares every night. Why he thought no one would ever help him. Neither of them had an answer. I thought not, Russell said, standing. He went to the corner with the plastic sheeting and removed something from a box of hammer. Clyde's eyes widened. Now, wait a minute. This has gone far enough. We can work something out. Like what? Money, Clyde said desperately. I've got money. Offshore accounts. 50,000 cash. It's yours. We'll leave town. Never contact Lennox again. Russell twirled the hammer thoughtfully. And all the other kids you've hurt? The other women? Jasper told me there have been others. He's lying, Clyde insisted. Jasper's a drunk, a has-been. He's jealous of my success. Jasper has nothing to gain by lying, Russell replied. You, on the other hand, Vivica tried a different approach. Think about Lennox, she pleaded. If you do this, he loses both parents. Is that what you want? Don't you dare use my son's name, Russell said, his control slipping for the first time. Not after what you did to him. I'm his mother, Vivica shouted. I raised him for years while you were gone. Where were you when he needed you? Fighting a war, Russell replied coldly. And then fighting you in court after you lied to keep him from me. You weren't fit, Vivica spat. A broken soldier with PTSD and anger issues. The courts agreed. Because you manipulated them, Russell countered. Like you manipulate everyone. But that ends today. He approached Clyde, hammer in hand. You first, I think. Vivica should see what's coming. Clyde began to struggle wildly against his restraints, the chair rattling against the floor. You can't do this. Think about it, man. Murder. You'll go to prison. Only if they find you, Russell said again. And they won't. Not out here. The execution, when it came, was swift and calculated. A single blow to the base of the skull. Clyde's body twitched once, then went still. Blood pooled on the plastic sheeting beneath him. Vivica screamed a primal sound of terror. You killed him. You actually killed him. Russell turned to her, his face betraying no emotion. Yes, I'm his mother, Vivica sobbed. All pretense gone now. Please, Russell. I'm Lennox's mother. You were supposed to protect him, Russell whispered. That's what mothers do. Her death was equally efficient. No hesitation, no last-minute mercy. Afterward, Russell stood in the center of the cellar, surrounded by death. He felt nothing, no satisfaction, no remorse. Just a strange emptiness, as if he'd done nothing more significant than take out the trash. The disposal took hours. Russell worked methodically, wrapping the bodies in the plastic sheeting, digging beneath the cellar's dirt floor, burying them deep. He cleaned obsessively, removing every trace of blood, every strand of hair, every fiber that might tell the story of what had happened here. When it was done, he built a small fire outside, burning the gloves, the plastic, his clothes. As the flames consumed the evidence, Russell watched the smoke rise into the darkening sky, carrying with it the last vestiges of his old life. Tomorrow, he would return home to Lennox. He would be a father, nothing more, nothing less. The war was over. Peace of a sort had been 1.2 weeks past. Then a month. Summer began its slow transition into fall. Lennox started at the local high school, joined the football team. Russell went to work each day at the auto shop, came home, made dinner. A normal life, or the appearance of one, the disappearance of Vivica and Clyde caused ripples in the small town, but not the waves Russell had expected. The police investigation seemed perfunctory at best. Detective Harper, a heavy-set man with permanent sweat stains under his arms, interviewed Russell once. When's the last time you saw either of them? He asked, notebook open but pen motionless. Vivica came by about a month ago, Russell answered truthfully. Wanted to discuss custody arrangements. Haven't seen Clyde at all, except briefly at his bar. Harper nodded, not bothering to write this down. And your son? You have any contact with him? Not that I'm aware of. Again, not a lie. He doesn't like to talk about his mother much. Can't blame him there, Harper muttered, then caught himself. I mean, divorce is hard on kids. Russell simply nodded, waiting for more probing questions that never came. Finally, Harper closed his notebook without having written a single word. Well, if you hear anything, let us know. Between you and me, word is they skipped town owing money to some people you don't want to owe money to. Wouldn't be the first time. It seemed the town had already written its own explanation, one that required no investigation, no justice, no uncomfortable truths. Clyde, it emerged, had a gambling problem. Vivica had expensive tastes. They'd been living beyond their means for years, and there were rumors whispered at first. then spoken more openly as weeks passed about Clyde's treatment of women, of Vivica's coldness toward her son. The story morphed from they skipped town to avoid debts to they skipped town because people were starting to ask questions. At the scrapyard, new ownership was announced. Jasper, the former bartender, had apparently purchased the establishment from Clyde just before the disappearance, a fact that raised eyebrows, but was ultimately accepted as fortunate timing. Russell ran into Jasper at the grocery store one evening. They exchanged nods, nothing more. But Jasper's eyes held knowledge not of specifics, perhaps, but of generalities. He knew, in the way that people sometimes know things without evidence or confession, what Russell had done. And he would never speak of at home. Lennox was transforming. The haunted look in his eyes had faded. He laughed more, spoke more. He wore t-shirts and shorts without hesitation. When school began, he made friends easily, joined activities, lived the life of a normal teenager. One evening, Russell came home to find Lennox in the garage, working on the Honda motorcycle they'd started restoring at the beginning of summer. "Thought you might want to finish this together," Lennox said, not looking up from the engine. Russell set down his lunchbox, picked up a wrench. "Sounds good to me." They worked in companionable silence for a while. Then Lennox said, casually, "Mom hasn't called or texted. Not in weeks." Russell's hand stilled momentarily, then continued working. "That bother you?" Lennox seemed to consider the question. "No," he finally said. "It's peaceful, not having to worry about her showing up. Or him." Russell nodded, not trusting himself to speak. "Dad." Lennox set down his tool, turning to face his father. "Did you do something?" The question hung in the air, both vague and precise. Russell met his son's gaze steadily. "What do you think?" Lennox didn't look away. I think I don't have to be afraid anymore." "That's right," Russell confirmed. "You don't." Lennox nodded once, then picked up his wrench again. They returned to working on the motorcycle, the question and its implied answer settling between them like a shared secret never to be spoken of directly again. Fall gave way to winter. Christmas approached. Lennox was doing well in school, had a girlfriend named Melissa, spent weekends playing video games with friends or working on the now-running motorcycle. Russell had started dating Callie, tentatively at first, then with growing confidence as she proved to be not just an ally, but a genuine partner. The investigation into Vivica and Clyde's disappearance had effectively ceased. Their story had been written by the town's collective imagination, a narrative that required no body, no murder weapon, no criminal, just two unsavory individuals who had fled their responsibilities and debts. Russell had almost allowed himself to believe it was over, that the ghosts had been properly buried. Then came the teddy bear. Lennox was cleaning his room, packing away childish things he no longer needed, when he found an old stuffed bear, worn and faded, missing one eye. He brought it to Russell, who was washing dishes in the kitchen. "Remember this?" Lennox asked, holding up the bear. "You gave it to me for my 5th birthday." Russell dried his hands, examining the toy. "I remember. You carried it everywhere for a year." "Mom hated it," Lennox said, turning the bear over in his hands. "She tried to throw it away once, but I hid it." His fingers pressed against the bear's stomach, and he frowned. "That's weird. It feels hard inside." Before Russell could respond, Lennox had found a small, hidden zipper in the bear's back. He opened it and reached inside, pulling out a USB drive. "What's this?" Lennox asked, holding it up. Russell took the drive, examining it. "I don't know. Never seen it before." "Let's check it out," Lennox suggested. Russell hesitated, a sense of foreboding settling over him. But refusing would only raise questions. "All right," he agreed. "Let's see what's on it." They went to Russell's study, where his laptop sat on the desk. He plugged in the drive, clicked on the single folder it contained. Inside were video files, dozens of them, labeled by date. Russell opened one at random. The screen showed Vivica's living room. Clyde sat on the couch, drinking, while Vivica paced, gesturing angrily. The video had audio. "He's becoming a problem," Vivica was saying. "If he tells anyone at school." "He won't," Clyde interrupted. "He's too scared. Besides, who'd believe him over us?" Russell quickly closed the file, but Lennox had already understood. "They recorded themselves," he whispered. "Talking about..." Russell opened another file, earlier date. This one showed Clyde sitting across from a man Russell didn't recognize. Money changing hands. The man saying, "She won't press charges. I've taken care of it." Another file, Vivek on the phone, laughing. Of course the judge ruled in my favor. He owes me. Remember that little problem with his teenage babysitter? I have photos. File after file, each more damning than the last. Blackmail, bribery, discussions of abuse, not just of Lennox, but of others. References to city officials, police officers, even a judge, all compromised in some way. My God, Russell breathed. It's all here. Everything. Lennox stared at the screen, his face pale. Why would she record this? Keep it. Insurance, Russell realized. Leverage. If anyone ever tried to move against her or Clyde, they had dirt on half the town. He turned to Lennox. Did you know about this? The recordings? Lennox shook his head. No, but I remember the bear going missing for a while last year. Mom must have taken it, hidden the drive inside, then put it back in my room. A good hiding place, something I kept, but never used anymore. Russell sat back, mind racing. The USB drive contained enough evidence to expose not just Vivica and Clyde's crimes, but a network of corruption throughout the town. People who had enabled them, covered for them, profited from their schemes. Dad, Lennox's voice was uncertain. What do we do with this? Russell considered the question carefully. The videos could raise dangerous questions about Vivica and Clyde's disappearance, about Russell's involvement. But they could also bring justice to others who had failed Lennox, who had allowed his abuse to continue. I think, Russell said slowly, we make sure the right people see this. The next day, Russell copied the files to a new drive. He packaged it anonymously, with a typed note explaining the contents, and mailed it to a state investigator he'd researched online, someone with no connections to their town, that a week later, the storm broke. State police descended on the town. The mayor was arrested. 2 police officers. A family court judge. Even Detective Harper, who had so casually dismissed the investigation into Vivica and Clyde's disappearance. The town reeled as the story unfolded in the media. Years of corruption exposed. A system that had protected abusers while failing their victims. The focus shifted entirely from the missing couple to the infrastructure that had enabled them in one connected Russell or Lennox to the leak. As far as the public knew, state authorities had received an anonymous tip about corruption, leading to the discovery of a USB drive during a search of Clyde's abandoned house. Russell watched the arrests on the local news, Lennox beside him on the couch, Callie in an armchair nearby. None of them spoke as the reporter detailed the charges, the evidence, the potential sentences. When the broadcast ended, Lennox turned to his father. Justice, he said simply. Russell nodded. For everyone they hurt. Not just you. Callie looked between them, understanding passing unspoken. She reached for Russell's hand, squeezed it once. A gesture of support, of complicity, of acceptance. Whatever had happened in the past, whatever sins had been committed, they were moving forward together. Spring came, bringing with it new growth, renewal. The investigations and trials of the corrupt officials continued, but had faded from daily headlines to occasional updates. Life in the small town was finding a new normal. Russell and Lennox had settled into a comfortable routine. Weekdays were for work and school. Friday nights, they usually had dinner with Callie and sometimes her children, who had returned from their grandparents at the end of summer. Weekends often found them at the cabin, fishing in the creek, hiking in the woods. They never discussed what lay beneath the cabin floor, never acknowledged the nightmares that sometimes still woke Russell, drenched in sweat. Some things remained buried. In every sense, Lennox was flourishing. His grades were excellent. He'd made quarterback on the JV football team. The traumatized boy of last summer seemed like a distant memory, but occasionally, Russell would catch a shadow passing across his son's face. A momentary withdrawal when certain topics arose. Healing wasn't linear, Russell knew. It came in fits and starts, in 2 steps forward and 1 step back. That on a warm Saturday in April, Russell and Lennox sat on the dock of the creek behind the cabin, fishing poles in hand. The water gurgled peacefully. Birds called in the trees. A perfect day. Dad, Lennox broke the comfortable silence. Can I ask you something? Russell reeled in his line a bit. Sure. Do you ever think about them? Mom and Clyde. Russell kept his eyes on the water. Sometimes, he admitted, less and less as time goes by. Lennox nodded, absorbing this. The cops never really looked for them, did they? Not seriously. No, Russell agreed. Too many people were happy they were gone. Too many secrets they could have exposed if found. They fell silent again, the only sound the gentle splash of water against the dock posts. Then Lennox asked the question that had perhaps been brewing for months. Dad, will they ever come back? Russell turned to look at his son. Lennox was nearly 16 now, taller, stronger, more confident. But in that moment, Russell saw the vulnerability still present beneath the surface, the need for absolute certainty that the monsters were truly gone. No, son, Russell replied, his eyes on the water. Ghosts can't come back if you bury them deep enough. Lennox's shoulders relaxed visibly. He nodded once, accepting this truth. Good, he said simply. Later that evening, they drove back to town. Callie was coming over for dinner. Russell had been thinking about asking her to move in, not right away, but soon. Creating a real family for Lennox, for all of them, as they turned onto their street. Lennox said suddenly, I'm glad you're my dad. Russell glanced at him, surprised by the unexpected sentiment. I'm glad too, he replied, meaning it more than he could express. Even when Mom had me, Lennox continued, even when she and Clyde did what they did, I always remembered you. Remembered you were different. Russell gripped the steering wheel tighter. I should have fought harder. Should have seen the signs earlier. You couldn't have known, Lennox said, with the simple wisdom of youth. But when it mattered most, you believed me. You saved me. They pulled into the driveway. Callie's car was already there, parked to the curb. Before they got out, Lennox put a hand on Russell's arm. We're okay now, right? Both of us. Russell looked at his son, really looked at him. Saw the strength there, the resilience, but also the need for reassurance that the future held more than the past had given them. Yeah, Russell said with certainty. We're okay. As they walked toward the house, toward Callie waiting on the porch with a casserole and a smile, Russell felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The ghosts were buried. The future was unwritten. And in the end, nothing mattered more than the young man walking beside him, his son, his redemption, his reason for everything. The sacrifices have been worth it. The sins necessary. The justice absolute. In this clean, new world they'd created, there was room now for something Russell had thought lost forever. Hope.